In the far reaches of the South Pacific, southeast of Tahiti and northeast of Easter Island, lies a raised coral island known as Henderson. It forms part of the Pitcairn Group, one of the most isolated island chains on Earth. For centuries, it remained uninhabited. Henderson Island rises from the ocean as a limestone plateau, the result of ancient coral reefs lifted above sea level. Its shoreline is irregular and edged with jagged rock. In places, steep cliffs rise directly from the surf. There is no natural harbor. Landing is possible only in calm weather and only along limited stretches of reef. The island measures roughly 9 miles in length and 5 miles across at its widest point. Its interior is dense with scrub and low forest, rooted in porous coral ground. The soil is thin. Freshwater does not flow in streams or rivers. Rainwater collects briefly in shallow depressions before draining away. Trade winds pass steadily across its surface. The climate is warm but exposed. There is little shelter from wind or salt spray. The nearest permanently inhabited island is Pitcairn, more than 100 miles away across open ocean. In the 19th century, the South Pacific was vast and imperfectly charted. Many islands were marked only approximately on maritime maps. Ships traveling between the Americas and Australia passed through these waters, but not in steady lanes. Henderson Island stood apart from these routes. Remote, unoccupied, and without safe anchorage, it offered little reason for a vessel to approach. In 1834, the brig Hercules sailed in the South Pacific under the command of Captain James Henderson. She was a small trading vessel, operating within a maritime world that depended on seasonal winds and incomplete charts. Ships of her type carried goods between distant ports, linking colonial settlements with larger markets across the Pacific. The early 19th century was a period of expanding trade in the region. Whaling ships crossed the ocean in pursuit of sperm whales. Merchant vessels transported provisions, timber, tools, and manufactured goods. Navigation relied on sextant readings, chronometers, and printed charts that were not always precise. Longitude could be miscalculated. Reef systems were sometimes marked only generally. A ship's safety depended on weather judgment and the captain's experience. The Hercules was not a large ship. Like many brigs of the era, she carried a modest crew. Their names appear only in fragments within surviving records, but contemporary accounts confirm that they were sailors accustomed to long passages and physical labor. Work at sea followed a strict rhythm. Watches were kept through day and night. Sails were trimmed according to wind. Maintenance was constant. Wood hulls demanded vigilance against leaks and rot. Captain Henderson had command responsibility not only for navigation but for discipline and provisioning. Food was stored in casks, salted meat, hard biscuit, dried peas, flour. Water was rationed carefully, especially during long stretches without landfall. Fresh provisions could be taken aboard at ports or islands where trade was possible. The Pacific in the 1830s was not empty, but it was wide. Communication between ships was rare outside major anchorages. A vessel in distress might not be seen for weeks. Storm systems could develop with limited warning. Charts improved gradually through exploration, but many coral reefs remained hazards. The Pitcairn Islands were known by this time, though not frequently visited. Pitcairn itself had been settled decades earlier by the descendants of the Bounty mutineers. Henderson Island, however, remained uninhabited. Its raised coral cliffs and absence of safe anchorage discouraged regular approach. The Hercules entered this region as part of her ordinary course. There is no indication that the voyage began under unusual strain. Ships routinely passed through the area en route to other destinations. For crews accustomed to months at sea, the Pacific scale was accepted as fact. Life aboard would have been ordered and repetitive. Decks scrubbed each morning. Rigging inspected. Meals taken in shifts. The ocean horizon rarely changed. Land sightings, when they occurred, were noted and then left astern. In such voyages, danger did not announce itself in advance. It emerged from wind shifts, currents or unseen reefs. The difference between safe passage and disaster could lie in a single misjudged bearing. By late 1834, the Hercules approached the waters surrounding the Pitcairn Group. The charts available to Captain Henderson marked the islands, but the exact positions and surrounding reefs were imperfectly known. Coral formations could extend beyond visible breakers. Swells might conceal submerged rock. The Pacific remained calm for long intervals. Then weather could change without gradual transition. At this stage, the voyage still appeared routine. The crew continued their duties. The brig moved forward under sail, dependent on wind and on the accuracy of its calculations. Within days, those calculations would no longer matter. In late 1834, as the Hercules passed near the Pitcairn Group, conditions began to shift. Wind strengthened beyond its earlier steadiness. Swell increased. Visibility narrowed as squalls moved across open water. The precise sequence of events is recorded only in summary within later accounts. What is clear is that the brig was driven toward reef-strewn water near Henderson Island. Coral formations in this region extend outward from shore beneath the surface. In heavy swell, they are difficult to detect until a vessel is already too close. At some point during deteriorating weather, the Hercules struck reef. Impact against coral is abrupt. Wood hulls split along seams. Water enters rapidly. Attempts to back sails or lighten the vessel offer limited relief once a hull is fixed on stone. The brig could not be freed. Crew members moved quickly to preserve what could be saved. Maritime practice in wreck situations was direct. Casks of food were brought on deck. Water containers were secured. Tools, navigational instruments, and firearms were retrieved where possible. Boats were lowered if intact. Every action depended on remaining daylight and sea state. Henderson Island lay close enough to reach by small boat or raft. The island offered no harbor, but it offered land. In wreck situations, land, even barren land, meant stability. Over the following hours, the crew transferred themselves and portions of the ship's stores ashore. The brig, damaged beyond repair, remained lodged against reef. With continued surf, her structure would have weakened further. Once ashore, the situation became immediate and unambiguous. The Hercules was lost. There would be no refloating, no sail repair sufficient to resume passage. The nearest inhabited island, Pitcairn, lay more than 100 miles away across open ocean. Henderson Island had no settlement. No visible structures. No cultivated land. What had been a trading voyage became a land-based survival situation within a single tide. The crew stood on a raised coral island with salvaged supplies and no vessel capable of carrying them away. The first priority was water. Henderson Island has no streams and no permanent freshwater lakes. Rain falls intermittently, but the porous limestone absorbs it quickly. Shallow depressions in coral rock can hold water for short periods after heavy showers, but they are unreliable. For shipwrecked sailors accustomed to rationed casks, this absence defined the problem immediately. Among the items brought ashore from the Hercules were water containers and provisions. These stores created a temporary margin. They did not create security. Casks would empty. Salted meat would diminish. Hard biscuit would spoil in humidity. The crew established an initial camp near the landing point. Coral stone limited ease of construction, but timber and spars salvaged from the wreck provided material. Canvas from sails offered shelter from wind and sun. Structures were simple, low coverings anchored against trade winds, arranged close to one another for efficiency. Work followed necessity. Each day required the same actions: inspect stores, secure shelter, seek food, watch weather. Henderson Island supports seabird colonies. Nadas, boobies, and other species nest in trees and on open ground. Eggs could be collected during breeding periods. Adult birds could be taken by hand at night when less active. This provided protein but not variety. The surrounding reef held fish. Access depended on tide and sea state. Fishing required tools improvised from ship's gear, lines, hooks, and net fragments. Reef walking carried risk. Coral cuts easily. Infection in a tropical environment can develop quickly without medical treatment. There were also coconut palms in limited numbers, though not in extensive groves. Coconuts offered liquid and meat but could not support a group indefinitely. The island's interior vegetation consisted largely of scrub and low forest. The soil was thin and unsuitable for immediate cultivation. There is no evidence that the crew established agriculture during their early months. The wreck itself remained a resource. At low tide, portions of the Hercules could still be accessed. Iron fittings, nails, and timber were removed when possible. Over time, wave action would have broken down more of the hull, scattering debris along reef and shore. Salvage operations required timing and coordination. Routine emerged not from comfort but from repetition. Morning tasks included checking any rain catchments. Containers were positioned beneath makeshift gutters formed from sailcloth to collect runoff during showers. Water was rationed carefully. Salt intake from preserved meat increased thirst, making ration discipline critical. Sun exposure was constant. The raised coral surface reflects light. Shade existed beneath trees, but airflow there was reduced. Skin injuries from coral, insect bites, and minor wounds accumulated. Without trained medical support, treatment consisted of cleaning with available water and simple bandaging. Time in such conditions is measured by practical markers: the level of stores, the condition of shelter, the cycle of tides. Weeks passed without external contact. No passing ships were recorded during this early period. The crew's size placed strain on available resources. Exact numbers are uncertain in surviving records, but contemporary accounts suggest that not all who came ashore would survive the full period of isolation. Early months, however, were focused on stabilization rather than decline. There is evidence that an attempt was made to reach Pitcairn Island during this period. Small boats salvaged from the wreck could be repaired to limited seaworthiness. The distance, over 100 miles, was significant but not impossible in favorable conditions. Such an attempt required calculation: how many men to send, how much water to carry, whether remaining stores could sustain those left behind. The first departure attempt did not result in immediate rescue. Details of that voyage are sparse, but records indicate that not all men returned. Whether lost at sea or forced elsewhere by weather, the effect on those remaining would have been direct. Fewer hands meant less labor capacity. It also confirmed the difficulty of leaving. Daily life continued. Fire was maintained using driftwood and salvaged material. Cooking reduced reliance on salted rations when fresh fish or birds were available. Shelter structures were reinforced against wind shifts. The island did not change. It remained narrow, elevated, and exposed. What changed was the crew's understanding of its limits. They were no longer awaiting immediate rescue. They were managing duration. As months passed, survival shifted from short-term preservation to sustained management. The remaining crew reduced their reliance on salvaged provisions. Salted meat and ship's biscuit could not be replaced once consumed. Moisture and insects degraded what remained. Rationing became stricter. Fresh sources, fish, seabirds, eggs, and coconuts, formed a larger share of daily intake. Fishing improved with familiarity. The men learned the reef's safer paths and the timing of tides. Hooks were reshaped when possible. Lines were repaired repeatedly. The surrounding waters were productive but required physical effort. Each catch depended on endurance in sun and surf. Bird harvesting followed seasonal cycles. During nesting periods, eggs were more abundant. Outside those times, success varied. The island's limited vegetation offered little edible plant life beyond coconuts and a few scattered species of roots and leaves. No evidence suggests successful cultivation on any meaningful scale. Water remained the central concern. Rainfall could sustain them briefly, but dry intervals reduced reserves quickly. Containers were positioned carefully. Any vessel capable of holding runoff was preserved. Periods of low rainfall forced tighter rationing. Shelter structures evolved. Initial canvas coverings deteriorated under sun and salt exposure. Timber from the wreck was reassembled into more stable frames. Coral stone was stacked where possible to create low walls against wind. Construction remained basic, constrained by available tools and material. Physical condition fluctuated. A diet heavily dependent on fish and birds provided protein but limited nutritional diversity. Vitamin deficiencies likely developed over time, though contemporary records do not detail symptoms precisely. Weakness and fatigue would have affected labor capacity. At some point during the prolonged isolation, additional attempts were made to leave the island. Repairing or constructing a seaworthy craft from wreck remnants required planning and labor. Small open boats in the South Pacific are vulnerable to swell and shifting wind. Distance to Pitcairn remained unchanged. Success depended on weather windows that could not be predicted with precision. One such departure reduced the number of men remaining on Henderson. Surviving accounts suggest that at least some of those who attempted escape did not return. Whether they reached Pitcairn or were lost elsewhere was not immediately known to those left behind. For the men who remained, isolation deepened. Labor demands increased per person. Tasks once shared among several now required greater individual effort. Firewood collection, fishing, water management, and shelter maintenance continued without pause. Time became less distinct. Seasons in this latitude are subtle. Temperature variation is limited. Without structured calendar reference beyond memory and rough calculation, months blended into one another. There is no record of ceremony or marked anniversaries. Survival required consistency rather than reflection. By the second year, Henderson Island was no longer an unfamiliar place. Its limits were understood. Its resources were known in detail. What remained uncertain was duration. Extended isolation altered both physical condition and group structure. By the second and third years, the cumulative effects of limited diet and exposure became more visible. Accounts written after rescue indicate that several men did not survive the full period on Henderson Island. Precise medical causes are not recorded in detail, but prolonged nutritional imbalance, dehydration during dry intervals, and untreated injuries would have increased vulnerability. Small wounds acquired on coral reef can become serious without antiseptic care. Tropical infections advance quickly. Physical weakness reduces the body's resistance. Labor required to sustain food and water supplies did not lessen as strength declined. The number of survivors gradually decreased. Whether through illness, accident, or failed escape attempts, the group that had first come ashore was reduced over time. Each loss altered daily routine. Fewer men meant longer hours for those remaining. Fishing, shelter repair, and water collection could not be abandoned. Psychological strain is less documented but implied. Henderson Island offered no external stimulus beyond wind, surf, and the repetitive cycle of tasks. No passing ships were recorded during this extended period. The men could not rely on chance discovery. Attempts to leave the island appear to have continued intermittently. Constructing a seaworthy craft from salvaged timber and limited tools required coordination. The distance to Pitcairn, more than 100 miles, remained the nearest realistic objective. No larger settlement lay closer. At least one departure attempt ended without confirmed success. Some men were lost during these efforts. For those remaining, uncertainty persisted. A boat leaving the island might succeed or vanish. There was no means of communication. As numbers fell, the balance between resource availability and labor shifted. Fewer mouths required less food, but fewer hands meant slower work. Water storage remained fragile. Periods of reduced rainfall likely intensified rationing. Time during the final months blurred. Without reliable calendar tracking, the exact duration of their stay was later reconstructed from external records rather than daily logs kept ashore. What is documented is that nearly 3 years elapsed between wreck and final departure. By this stage, survival was no longer provisional. It had become prolonged endurance. The island itself remained unchanged: coral plateau, narrow beaches, steady wind. The difference lay in the diminished group moving across it. Eventually, only a small number of men remained alive on Henderson Island. Their options were limited to two: continue sustaining themselves indefinitely within known constraints, or attempt once more to cross open ocean in a vessel of their own construction. They chose to leave after nearly 3 years on Henderson Island. The remaining survivors committed to departure. Using timber salvaged from the Hercules, along with remnants of spars and fittings preserved from earlier recovery efforts, they constructed a small open boat. The craft was necessarily simple. Tools were limited. Iron fastenings had been reused repeatedly. What they produced was not a vessel designed for comfort or cargo, but for distance. The objective was Pitcairn Island, approximately 100 miles to the west. It was the nearest inhabited land known to them. The descendants of the Bounty mutineers had settled there decades earlier. Though isolated, Pitcairn offered water, cultivation, and permanent shelter. Departure required timing. The South Pacific's prevailing trade winds could assist westward movement if conditions aligned. Supplies were rationed for the crossing: water in containers, limited food, and essential tools. When they left Henderson, the island remained uninhabited behind them. There is no record of ceremony or marker placed to note their long stay. The coral plateau receded from view as the small vessel moved into open water. The voyage to Pitcairn was exposed and uncertain. Open boats are vulnerable to swell and weather shifts. However, records confirm that at least a portion of the departing men reached Pitcairn successfully. From there, word of the prolonged survival reached broader maritime networks. The men who arrived were described as weakened but alive. Their account established the duration of their isolation and the loss of several companions during the years on Henderson. The island they left returned to silence. Henderson Island remained uninhabited. Its isolation, coral cliffs, and lack of freshwater continued to discourage settlement. For nearly 3 years, it had been a place of endurance, a setting in which human survival was measured in routine, observation, and careful management of limited resources. The story of the Hercules crew is recorded quietly in maritime logs and letters. It demonstrates the physical demands of prolonged isolation and the limits imposed by geography, weather, and available tools. The survival of some crew members was neither dramatic nor celebrated at the time. It was an outcome achieved through sustained labor and adaptation rather than heroism. In the broader history of the Pacific, Henderson Island serves as a reminder of how remoteness shapes human experience. Its silence persists, a testament to endurance and the measured persistence required to survive where the ocean isolates and the land offers little beyond the essentials. The island remains as it was: quiet, uninhabited, and distant.